Hi, what's my symbolism? It's a tale of two books. Get it? I'm just being goofy. This one looks so much prettier to hold up. This one's the one I'm reading from. So I thought I'd hold them both up just to, be a fun start. I don't know that it was a fun start. It's a rainy afternoon. We've had about 3 or 4 days of rain here in Louisiana. Just finished work. It's a Friday. Yay! I work remotely on Fridays, so it's hard to make myself get up and stop working because I'm like right in the middle of a project. And one of you came on, Fareed came on to Discord and, hey, Adam, and asked me if I was going to read today for Tale of Two Cities. So I said, yeah, in about 30 minutes. And I think it's been longer than 30 minutes. You can also see that I have, hey, Fareed, I was just talking about you, that you had asked me if I was going to come on and read. I have my bookmark in the back of the book because this is where all of our questions come from. Words we're going to be looking out for, starting on page 13. So thank you so much. You helped me with Scarlet Letter. Oh, that's a good one. That's a hard one to read on your own, though. So words we're looking for in this section, starting at page, okay. Disconcerted. I don't know if we'll get there today because I'm going to read chapter 4. And yeah, 20. So it looks like we'll only get, no, we won't get a word today, but I'll probably stop and mention some to you. We also have some questions, but I don't think that the way these are set up is we don't know the answers until after we've read all of 2 through 6. Have you ever read No, I have not, but I always like, I'm reading an Out West book called Angle of Repose right now by Wallace Stenger. Hey, Jaspreet, it's good to see you. Or I don't see you, but it's nice to have you here again. So this is called the preparation. And remember, the Dover Road is from Dover to Calais, France. There's no road. It's a ferry that they're going to have to take. But they're on the road from London to Dover, which is the easternmost point of England before the English Channel comes in. And so they're trying to get in this mail coach that they're in to Dover to take the or actually, I don't know. I don't remember. In my mind, I remember that they're going to France, but maybe they're coming back from. But in my book, which is this AMSCO literature program, so the page is 13, chapter 4, the preparation. Can y'all hear that bird? It is just a chirping. When the mail got successfully to Dover in the course of the forenoon, the head drawer of the, I'm assuming driver, of the Royal George Hotel opened the coach door as was his custom. Dinah, if you're out there doing all your research, I'd love you to tell me what a drawer, the head drawer is on a coach. Or maybe he was in the pub, I don't know. He did it with some flourish of ceremony, for a mail journey from London in winter was an achievement to congratulate an adventurous traveler upon. Remember, we've talked about the danger that's been set. The tone is that this is a real difficult journey. By that time, there was only one adventurous traveler left to be congratulated, for the 2 others had been set down at their respective roadside destinations. The mildewy inside of the coach, with its damp and dirty straw, its disagreeable smell, and its obscurity, was rather like a larger dog kennel. Mr. Lorry, the passenger, shaking himself out of it in chains of straw, a tangle of shaggy wrapper, flapping hat, and muddy legs, was rather like a larger sort of dog. There will be a packet to Calais tomorrow, drawer? So, like a ferry? Yes, sir, if the weather holds and the wind sets tolerable fair. The tide will serve pretty nicely at about 2 in the afternoon, sir. Bed, sir? I shall not go to bed till night, but I want a bedroom and a barber. And then breakfast, sir? Yes, sir. That way, sir, if you please. Show Concord, gentleman's valise, and hot water to Concord. So Concord must be the room he's staying in. Pull off gentlemen's boots in Concord. What a different way of checking into a hotel then than we have now. If you check into a hotel, they don't give you this kind of service, right? Everything's extra. You might have breakfast. You might have a breakfast bar that comes with your room. But nobody shows you to the. I lived in a time where you could still have a bellman or somebody that carries your bags, but pretty much most motels don't. Full service hotels might. You will find a fine sea coal fire, sir. Fetch Barbara to Concord. Stir about there now for Concord. The Concord bedchamber being always assigned to a passenger by the mail, and passengers by the mail always being heavily wrapped up from head to foot, the room had the odd interest for the establishment of the Royal George, that although but one kind of man was seen to go into it, all kinds and varieties of men came out of it, because they were all wrapped up. So you can't, those were all the same kind of people going in. You can't tell them apart. But when they got out, they're cleaned up. They're in their normal clothes. They're not in their travel clothes. And so now you can recognize them. Consequently, another drawer and 2 porters and several maids and the landlady were all loitering by accident at various points of the road between the Concord and the coffee room, when a gentleman of 60, formally dressed in a brown suit of clothes, pretty well worn but very well kept, with large square cuffs on his that fold over on his sleeve, and large flaps to the pockets, passed along on his way to his breakfast. The coffee room had no other occupant that forenoon than the gentleman in brown. His breakfast table was drawn before the fire, and as he sat, with its light shining on him, waiting for the meal, he sat so still that he might have been sitting for his portrait. Very orderly and methodical he looked, with a hand on each knee, and a loud watch ticking a sonorous sermon under his flapped waistcoat, as though it pitted its gravity and longevity against the levity and evanescence of the brisk fire. So lots of big words there. The gravity, seriousness, longevity, length of time, levity, lightness, humor, and evanescence of the brisk, like glow of the brisk fire. He had a good leg and was a little vain of it, for his brown stockings fitted sleek and close and were of a fine texture. His shoe and buckles, too, though plain, were trim. I don't know if you can see on this picture. See how the pants go to the knee, and then you can see the stockings and then the shoes. So that's what they're talking about. I feel a sneeze coming on, but I can't get it. Was as white as the tops of the waves that broke upon the neighboring beach, and at the specks of sail that glinted in the sunlight far at sea. A face habitually suppressed and quieted was still lighted up under the quaint wig by a pair of moist, bright eyes that must have cost their owner in years gone by some pains to drill to the composed and reserved expression of Tellson's Bank. So this was typical that they would wear wigs. I don't know if you can see again in this picture. Let me see, get some light. See the guy in the center? He's got that typical George Washington white wig on. Very typical of the day. He had a healthy color in his cheeks, and his face, though lined, bore few traces of anxiety. So he's got some wrinkles. We know he's got some age, but he's a peaceful person. He doesn't have any worry wrinkles on him, so to speak. But perhaps the confidential bachelor clerks in Tellson's Bank were principally occupied with the cares of other people, and perhaps second-hand cares, like second-hand clothes, come easily off and on. Now, you can't know this now, but that's a big characterization about this character that we just know his name is Jarvis Lorry, and he works for Tellson's Bank. But this is really, having read the story before, this gives us a big hint into his character. It's a good line for characterization. It says, because you're worried about other people's lives, you can take those clothes off and on as easy as you can clothes, because they're not your worries. It's easy to deal with the worries of another person. You're not vested in them. And that's very typical of who this character is. Completing his resemblance to a man who was sitting for his portrait, Mr. Lorry dropped off to sleep. The arrival of his breakfast roused him, and he said to the drawer as he moved his chair to it, "I wish accommodation prepared for a young lady who may come here at any time today. She may ask for Mr. Jarvis Lorry, Or she may only ask for a gentleman from Tellson's Bank. Please let me know. So he's saying there's a woman coming to ask, or a young woman to ask for me. And she may ask for this name, or she may ask for an employee of Tellson's Bank. Bring her to me. That's me. That's who she's looking for. Hey, Sid. Yes, sir. Tellson's Bank in London, sir? Yes. Yes, sir. We have oftentimes the honor to entertain your gentlemen in their traveling backwards and forwards betwixt London and Paris, sir. A vast deal of traveling, sir, in Tellson and Company's house. Yes, we are quite a French house as well as an English one, so it's an international bank. Yes, sir. Not much in the habit of traveling yourself, I think, sir. Not of late. It is 15 years since I came last from France. Now, didn't they talk about in the previous chapter 15 years? Didn't we talk about, I'm looking back and I hadn't annotated this, but if I'm not mistaken, we've referenced 15 years before. Or maybe that's later in the story and I just remember it. But it's been 15 years since he's been to France. Indeed, sir. That was before my time here, sir. Before our people's time here, sir. The George, the pub they're in, was in other hands at that time, sir. I believe so. But I would hold a pretty wager, sir, that a house like Tellson and Company was flourishing a matter of 50, not to speak of 15 years ago. You might treble it, make it 3 times that, and say 150, yet not be far from the truth. Indeed, sir. So Tellson's Bank is an international bank and a very established and reputable bank. Rounding his mouth and both his eyes as he stepped backward from the table, the waiter shifted his napkin from his right arm to his left, dropped into a comfortable attitude, and stood surveying the guest while he ate and drank, as from an observatory or watchtower, according to the immemorial usage of waiters in all ages. So he's standing like in the corner waiting to add water or get coffee or take a dish. He's just there, poised like a statue. When Mr. Lorry had finished his breakfast, he went out for a stroll on the beach. The little narrow, crooked town of Dover hid itself away from the beach and ran its head into the chalk cliffs like a marine ostrich. The beach was a desert of heaps of sea and stones tumbling wildly about. And the sea did what it liked, and what it liked was destruction. So the sea just keeps, I'm from Louisiana, and we have that at the Gulf. It comes up and just wears away much of Louisiana. So you have to do that coastal preservation. It thundered at the town and thundered at the cliffs to the waves and brought the coast down madly. The air among the houses was of so strong a piscatory fish flavor that one might have supposed sick fish went up to be dipped in it, as sick people went down to be dipped in the sea. A little fishing was done in the port, and a quantity of strolling about by night and looking seaward, particularly at those times when the tide made and was near flood. Small tradesmen who did no business whatsoever sometimes unaccountably realized large fortunes, and it was remarkable that nobody in the neighborhood could endure a lamplighter. So here we are. Hey, Kelly. Here we are with a lot of that unnecessary detail I was referencing to you. This is not going to go to plot. It's just storytelling, setting the scene, pulling you in. For me, it alienates me from the story. As the day declined into the afternoon and the air, which had been, so I would say if you guys fast forward me, I would probably skip down until I'll put a hand up like that to slow it down if you want, because this is just filler. As the day declined into the afternoon, and the air, which had been at intervals clear enough to allow the French coast to be seen, became again charged with mist and vapor, Mr. Lorry's thoughts seemed to cloud too. When it was dark and he sat before the coffee room fire waiting his dinner as he had awaited his breakfast, his mind was busily digging in the live red coals. Notice that repetition. Teachers are going to ask for literary devices, and that repetition of digging is going to have significance. A bottle of good claret, which is a type of wine, after dinner does a digger in the red coals no harm. Otherwise, then, as it has a tendency to throw him out of work. Mr. Lorry had been idle a long time and had just poured out his last glassful of wine with as complete an appearance of satisfaction as is ever to be found in an elderly gentleman of a fresh complexion who has got to the end of a bottle, when a rattling of wheels came up the narrow street and rumbled in the inn yard. He set down his glass untouched. "This is Mademoiselle," he said. In a very few minutes, the waiter came in to announce that Miss Manette had arrived from London and would be happy to see the gentleman from Tellson's. So soon? Miss Manette had taken some refreshment on the road and required none then, and was extremely anxious to see the gentleman from Tellson's immediately, if it suited his pleasure and convenience. The gentleman from Tellson's had nothing left for it but to empty his glass with an air of stolid desperation, settle his odd little flaxen wig at the ears, and follow the waiter to Miss Manette's apartment. It was a large, dark room, finished in funereal, looking like a funeral home manner, with black horsehair that was a type of covering of chairs and was very typical of the day, and loaded with heavy, dark tables. These had been oiled and polished, until the tall 2 candles in the table in the middle of the room were gloomily reflected on every leaf, as if they were buried in deep graves of black mahogany, and no light to speak of could be expected from them until they were dug out. Look at the mood that's being set. It's like a funeral and this digging. And remember, we have this expression, recalled to life. So notice how Dickens is setting the mood with every bit of word choice that he's used. He's reinforcing the mood. The obscurity was so difficult to perpetrate that Mr. Lorry, picking his way over the well-worn Turkey carpet, supposed Miss Manette to be, for the moment, in some adjacent room adjoining next door, until having got past the 2 tall candles, he saw, standing to receive him by the table between them and the fire, a young lady of not more than 17, in a riding cloak, and still holding her straw traveling hat. Oh, I have one on here. My straw traveling hat. Should I put it on? Got this in Tunisia from a dear friend. She hand wove it for me. I have to keep it down like that. Getting ready for the beach, eh? So there she is with her straw hat by its ribbon in her hand, but I don't have a ribbon on mine. As his eyes rested on a short, slight, pretty figure, direct characterization, a quantity of golden hair, a pair of blue eyes that met his own with an inquiring look, and a forehead with a singular capacity, remembering how young and smooth it was, of lifting and knitting itself into an expression that was not quite one of perplexity or wonder or alarm, or merely of a bright fixed attention, though it included all the 4 expressions. As his eyes rested on these things, a sudden vivid likeness passed before him of a child whom he had held in his arms on the passage across that very channel one cold time, when the hail drifted heavily and the sea ran high. The likeness passed away like a breath along the surface of the gaunt pier glass behind her, on the frame of which a hospital procession of cupids, several headless and all cripples, were offering black baskets of Dead Sea fruit to, and he made his formal bow to Miss Manette. So there's some things to draw together. There was a lot of language. He's saying, she looks familiar. He's told us the last time he went to France was 15 years ago. This girl looks 17, and he had a remembrance of a little child, a 1 or 2-year-old, on his lap, and she looks somewhat familiar to that girl. So you can put all that together that Dickens is telling us, indeed, Jarvis Lorry knows this girl and took her to France 15 years ago. That's going to end up being true. But you've got to really put those pieces together. Pray take a seat. In a very clear and pleasant young voice, a little foreign in its accent, but a very little indeed. I kiss your hand, miss, said Mr. Lorry with the manners of an earlier date, as he made his formal bow again and took a seat. I received a letter from the bank, sir, yesterday, informing me that some intelligence or discovery, the word is not material, miss, either word will do, respecting the small property of my poor father, whom I never saw, so long dead. So she's saying she's got news about her dead father's estate, his money. Mr. Lorry moved in his chair and cast a troubled look towards the decorations on the wall, as if they had any help for anybody in their absurd baskets. Like he keeps turning to these inanimate objects as though they could help him, but of course they can't help him. Render it necessary that I should go to Paris, there to communicate with the gentleman of the bank, so good as to be dispatched to Paris for the purpose. Myself, as I was prepared to hear, sir. She curtsied to him. He saying, I'm going to go. Young ladies made curtsies in those days, with a pretty desire to convey to him that she felt how much older and wiser he was than she. He made her another bow. I replied to the bank, sir, that it was as it was considered necessary by those who know and who are so kind as to advise me that I should go to France, and that as I am an orphan and have no friend who could go with me, I should esteem it highly if I may be permitted to place myself during the journey under that worthy gentleman's protection. She said, the bank tells me I need to go to France, but I'm an orphan. I don't have anybody to go with me. So she's coming to ask him, will you accompany me to Paris? The gentleman had left London, but I think a messenger was sent after him to beg the favor of his waiting for me here. I was happy, said Mr. Lorry, to be entrusted with the charge. I shall be more happy to execute it. So he said, sure, you can ride with me. Sir, I thank you indeed. I thank you gratefully. It was told to me by the bank that the gentleman would explain to me the details of the business, and that I must prepare myself to find them of a surprising nature. I have done my best to prepare myself, and I naturally have a strong and eager interest to know what they are. Naturally, said Mr. Lorry. Yes, after a pause, he added, again settling the crisp flaxen wig at the ears. He's like pulling on his, you see me fool with my hair all the time. He's pulling on his wig. It is very difficult to begin. He did not begin, but in his decision met her glance. The young forehead lifted itself into singular expression, but it was pretty and characteristic. Now remember the characterization of this girl, Miss Manette. She's really beautiful. She's really the stereotypical concept of beauty. Beautiful. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, smooth skin. So she's a sweet character. And she raised her hand as if with an involuntary action she caught at or stayed some passing shadow, like she's trying to catch something. Are you quite a stranger to me, sir? He's familiar to her, too. Am I not? Mr. Lorry opened his hands and extended them outwards with an argumentative smile. Between the eyebrows and just over the little feminine nose, the line of which was as delicate and fine as it was possible to be, the expression deepened itself as she took her seat thoughtfully in the chair by which she hitherto remained standing. He watched her as she mused, and the moment she raised her eyes again went on. In your adopted country, I presume, I can do no better than to address you as a young English lady. Miss Manette? If you please, sir. Miss Manette, I'm a man of business. I have a business charge to acquit myself of. In your reception of it, don't heed me any more than if I was a speaking machine. Truly, I am not much else. I will, with your leave, relate to you, with your permission, tell you, miss, the story of one of our customers. He's saying, don't think of me as a person, just think of me as a machinery to do work for you. Unbroken. Elena, I don't know that one. I mean, it's not familiar. Who's the author or what's the blurb about it? So this is also the characterization. This is how Jarvis Lorry sees himself. And in that whole taking off the clothes, it's easy to be worried or not worried about my clients. And he's saying, I'm just here to be at your service. Don't think of me as a human. Think of me as, a robot, if you will, at your service. He seemed willfully to mistake the word she had repeated when he added in a hurry, yes, customers. In the banking business, we usually call our connection our customers. He was a French gentleman, a scientific gentleman, a man of great acquirements, a doctor, not of Beauvais. Why, yes, of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of Beauvais. Elena, I'm sorry, I don't know it. Have you looked on YouTube to see if there's a reading of it? Because I won't have a chance to read it. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of good reputation in Paris. I had the honor of knowing him there. Our relations were business relations, but confidential. I was at the time in our French house and had been, 20 years. At that time, I may ask, at what time, sir? I speak, miss, of 20 years ago. He married an English lady, and I was one of the trustees. His affairs, like the affairs of many other French gentlemen and French families, were entirely in Tellson's hands. In a similar way, I am, or I have been, trustee of one kind or another for scores of our customers. The trustee is like the guardian of their information. There are mere business relations, miss. There is no friendship in them, no particular interest, nothing like sentiment. I have passed from one to another in the course of my business life, just as I pass from one of our customers to another in the course of my business day. In short, I have no feelings. He says it again. I am a mere machine. To go on. But this is my father's story, sir. And I began to think, the curiously roughened forehead was very intent upon him, that when I was left an orphan through my mother surviving my father only 2 years, so her father died, and 2 years later her mother died. It was you who brought me to England. I'm almost sure it was you. Mr. Lorry took the hesitating little hand that confidingly advanced to take his, and he put it with some ceremony to his lips. So he gives her that old-time kiss. He then conducted the young lady straightway to her chair again, and holding the chair back with his left hand, and using his right by turns to rub his chin, pull his wig at the ears, or point at what he said, stood looking down into her face until she sat looking up into his. Miss Manette, it was I. And you will see how truly I spoke of myself just now in saying I had no feelings, and that all the relations I hold with my fellow creatures are mere business relations, when you reflect that I have never seen you since. Isha, my vibes are so peaceful right now. Well, the bird is chirping. It's Friday afternoon. My voice is waning, and I love this story. So I'm glad I have peaceful vibes. I'll put you right to sleep. That bird. No, you have been the ward of Tellson's house since, and a ward is like in the custody of. They are the guardians of. You've been the ward of Tellson's house since, and I've been busy with the other business of Tellson's house since. Feelings, I have no time for them, no chance for them. I pass my whole life, miss, in turning an immense pecuniary mangle. I deal in money and business. Now, I will tell you that this is characterization of Mr. Lorry. He tries to play himself off as uncaring, but let's decide if he's a static or dynamic character as he goes. Let's remember he starts out by saying, I have no feelings, I don't care, I'm just a machine, just taking care of people's money. Let's see if that's true about him. We do need peaceful vibes right now. So the world in the United States is crazy. There's just so much violence going on. But it is Ramadan, which is a time of reflection. So it's a time of self-denial and giving yourself to the will of God. I think that's a great premise. So let's engage in that peaceful time. After this odd description of his daily routine of employment, Mr. Lorry flattened his flaxen wig upon his head with both hands, which was most unnecessary, for nothing could be flatter than its shining surface was before, and resumed his former attitude. So, miss, as you have remarked, this is the story of your regretted father. Now comes the difference. If your father had not died when he did, don't be frightened. How do you start? She did indeed start, like jump. And she caught his wrist with both her hands. Pray, said Mr. Lorry in a soothing tone, bringing his left hand from the back of the chair to lay it on the supplicatory fingers that clasped him in so violent a tremble. Pray control your agitation. A matter of business. As I was saying, her look so discomposed him that he stopped, wandered, and began again. So, he's supposed to be a machine with no feelings, but seeing this cute little young 18-year-old girl be so flustered, his heart goes out to her. As I was saying, if Monsieur Manette had not died, if he had suddenly and silently disappeared, if he had been spirited away, if it had not been difficult to guess to what dreadful place, though no art could trace him, if he had an enemy in some compatriot who could exercise a privilege that I, in my own time, would have known the boldest people afraid to speak of in a whisper across the water there, for instance, the privilege of filling up blank forms for the consignment of any one of the oblivion of a prisoner for any length of time, if his wife had implored the king, the queen, the court, the clergy, for any tidings of him, and all quite in vain, then the history of your father would have been the history of this unfortunate gentleman, the doctor of Beauvais. Now, I don't know what's taking so long to read this one. Well, we've read a lot of pages. We're at 31 minutes, but I want to keep reading. Fatima, I'm glad you're back. Thank you so much. You're so kind. And I just realized the importance of that date they mentioned before would have been the French Revolution. And that is going to be important. My mouth is so dry. We haven't hit 7:30 yet. I apologize. I can feel the sneeze. It's coming. So much for perfection, Fatima. I entreat you to tell me more, sir. I will. I'm going to. You can bear it. I can bear anything but the uncertainty you leave me at this moment. You speak collectedly, and you are collected, like calmly. Thank you, Fatima. I've been trying, those of you I heard me mention Ramadan, I try, although I'm not really what I would consider Muslim, I think the month of fasting is important. So it's not time to drink. So I can't get any honey and warm water. It's not time to drink where I am yet. So if y'all will just bear with me, I'll get through it. So to be collected is to be calm. That's good. Though his manner was less satisfied than his words, a matter of business. Regard it as a matter of business. Business that must be done. Like, don't be upset. Don't think of it as your father. Stay calm. Regard it as a matter of business. Business that must be done. Now, if this doctor's wife, though a lady of great courage and spirit, had suffered so intensely from this cause before her little child was born, the little child was a daughter, sir? A daughter. A matter of business. He's trying to keep her calm, right? He's trying to disengage her from her connection to this story about her own family. No, I think, Fatima, I think it's 7:30, 7:33, something like that. Not that I know exactly. And now it's only 4:58, so we've got a little time to go. But this is the strategy of what Mr. Lorry's doing. He's trying to disconnect her because he's got big news to deliver. So he's trying to prepare her and keep her calm. Back in the day, they believed that women were so frail and she would just pass out and, be horribly ill or horribly affected by a sudden shock. Don't be distressed, miss. If the poor lady had suffered so intensely before her little child was born that she came to the determination of sparing the poor child the inheritance of any part of the agony she had known the pangs of by rearing her in the belief that her father was dead. No, don't kneel. In heaven's name, why should you kneel to me? So we know that now she's fallen to her knees before him. For the truth, oh dear, good, compassionate sir, for the truth. A matter of business. You confuse me. How can I just transact business if I'm confused? So he wants to stay calm and he can't because she's so emotional. Let us be clear headed. If you could kindly mention now, for instance, what 9 times 9 pence are, or how many shillings and 20 guineas. He wants to recite math to calm himself down. It would be so encouraging. I should be so much more at ease about your state of mind. Without directly answering to his appeal, she sat so still when he had gently raised her, and the hands that had not ceased to clasp his wrists were so much more steady than they had been, that she communicated some reassurance to Mr. Jarvis Lorry. That's right. That's right. Courage. Business. You have business before you. Useful business. Miss Manette, your mother took this course with you, and when she died, I believe broken-hearted, having never slackened her unavailing search for your father, she left you, at 2 years old, to grow to be blooming, beautiful, and happy, without the dark cloud upon you of living in uncertainty whether your father soon wore his heart out in prison or wasted there through many lingering years. So he's telling her, your mother tried to protect you as a 2 year old, and she told you your father was dead because if she told you any differently and he was in prison, you would spend your whole childhood uncertain. This way you grew up with a certain amount of security, and this is why your mother told you this. So we're preparing this girl to have this big revelation that she's been lied to all her childhood. As he said the words, he looked down with admiring pity on the flowing golden hair, as if he pictured to himself that it might have been already tinged with gray. You know that your parents had no great possession, and that what they had was secured to your mother and to you. There has been no new discovery of money or of any other property, but he felt his wrist held closer and he stopped. So she's like grasping her. What are you going to tell me? She's holding on. The expression in the forehead, which had so particularly attracted his notice, and which was now immovable, had deepened into one of pain and horror. But he has been found. He is alive. Greatly changed, it is too probable. Almost a wreck, it is possible, though we will hope the best. Still alive. Your father has been taken to the house of an old servant in Paris, and we are going there. I, to identify him if I can, you, to restore him to life, love, duty, rest, comfort. A shiver ran through her frame, and from it, so she's just been told the man that you believed to be dead all your life, your father, is indeed alive, and Mr. Lorry is going to take her to meet her father that she hasn't seen since she was 2. And you can imagine that news. Very dramatic. A shiver ran through her frame. I'm going to see his ghost. It will be his ghost, not him. Mr. Lorry quietly chafed the hands that held his arm. There. Now, see now. The best and worst. Pay attention, my students, my accelerated students, my honors students, AP students. Pay attention to these doubles. So he's saying you'll see the best and the worst. That's best of times, worst times. So we're going to see that throughout the story. The best and the worst, those are paradoxes, are known to you now. You are well on your way to the poor wronged gentleman, and with a fair sea voyage and a fair land journey, you will soon be at his dear side. She repeated in the same tone, sunk to a whisper, I have been free. I have been happy. Yet his ghost has never haunted me. Only one thing more, said Mr. Lorry, laying stress upon it as a wholesome means of enforcing her attention. He has been found under another name, his own long forgotten and long concealed. It would be worse than useless now to inquire which, worse than useless to seek to know whether he has been for years overlooked or always designedly held a prisoner. It would be worse than useless now to make any inquiries, because it would be dangerous. There's that tone and that setting the mood again, foreshadowing. Better not to mention the subject anywhere or in any way, and to remove him for a while at all events out of France. Even I, safe as an Englishman, and even Tellson's, important as they are to France, avoid all naming of the manor. I carry about me not a scrap of writing openly referring to it. This is a secret service altogether. My credentials, entries, and memoranda are all comprehended in the one line, recalled to life, which may mean anything. But what is the matter? She doesn't notice a word. Miss Manette, perfectly still and silent, not fallen back in her chair, she sat under his hand, utterly insensible, like just kind of comatose, with her eyes open and fixed upon him, and with that last expression looking as if it were carved or branded into her forehead. So close was her hold upon his arm that he feared to detach himself lest he should hurt her. Therefore he called out loudly for assistance without moving. A wild-looking woman, whom even in his agitation, Mr. Lorry observed to be all of a red color, to have red hair, and to be dressed in some extraordinary tight-fitting fashion, and to have on her head a most wonderful bonnet like a grenadier, wood in measure, and good measure too, or a great Stilton cheese, came running into the room in advance of the inn servants, and soon settled the question of its detachment from the poor young lady by laying a brawny hand upon his chest and sending him flying back against the nearest wall. This red-headed lady comes flying in and she rips her girl from him. I really think this must be a man, was Mr. Lorry's breathless reflection simultaneously with his coming against the wall. Why, look at you all, bawled this figure, addressing the inn servants. Why don't you go and fetch things instead of standing there staring at me? I lost my place. I am not so much to look at, am I? Why don't you go and fetch things? I'll let you know if you don't bring smelling salts, cold water, and vinegar. Quick, I will. There was an immediate dispersal for these restoratives, and she softly laid the patient on a sofa and tended her with great skill and gentleness, calling her my precious and my bird, and spreading her golden hair aside her shoulders with great pride and care. And you in brown, she said indignantly, turning to Mr. Lorry, couldn't you tell her what you had to tell her without frightening her to death? Look at her with her pretty pale face and her cold hands. Do you call that being a banker? I mean, you were supposed to be professional, and now look at the mess you've made. Mr. Lorry was so exceedingly, by the way, pay attention to this female character, this redheaded character. She's going to be significant. Mr. Lorry was so exceedingly disconcerted by a question so hard to answer that he could only look on at a distance with much feeble sympathy and humility, while the strong woman, having banished the inn servants into the mysterious penalty of letting them know, something not mentioned if they stayed there, staring recovered her charge by a regular series of gradations, and coaxed her to lay her drooping head upon her shoulder. She took care of the girl, of Miss Manette. I hope she will do well now, said Mr. Lorry. No thanks to you and Brown if she does, my darling pretty. I hope, said Mr. Lorry, after another pause of feeble sympathy and humility, that you accompany Miss Manette to France. A likely thing, too, replied the strong woman. If I was ever intended that I should go across salt water, do you suppose Providence would have cast my lot in an island? This being another question hard to answer, Mr. Jarvis Lorry withdrew to consider it. And that's the end of chapter 4. Well, that took 43 minutes, so I won't keep your time. But now we have a lot of excitement. Who is this Miss Manette? Who is this wild redhead that's come after her to care for and obviously love her? What is Mr. Jarvis Lorry's take on all of this? He's delivered the news to Miss Manette that her father, and we're not going to name him, we're not going to use his name, has been in prison these last 15 years. And we're setting now the story and the conflict. Miss Manette is going to, beautiful, young, innocent, is going to meet her father for the first time in 15 years. Lexi, I'm so glad, Lexi. Are you on Instagram? Do you follow? Because I have a Lexi reader on Instagram. I'm just wondering if that's you. And I appreciate you stopping by. Guys, I know the book has a lot of negatives to it, a lot of language, a lot of unnecessary details, but it's going to get so good. And I hope some part of you is already caught into the story of who is this Miss Manette and these crazy old characters, Mr. Jarvis Lorry, and we haven't named the redhead, but she will become a character. Okay, thanks, Lexi, for letting me know. And welcome. I'm glad you're here. They are going to be fun characters. Dickens is just known for creating his great characters. And what I love about them, unlike, and your generation may not like that about them, they're not glamorous, glorious characters. They're just normal, like her wild hair. I can identify with that. This mother of five. If someone were after my child, I would come in there and grab him and what have you done and yell at everybody and cast them all around the room. So they're really fun characters that I think they will become endeared to you. So I hope you enjoy learning them. Right. She was 2 years old the last time she saw him. That's right, Fareed. And so that's pretty exciting. She hasn't seen him for 15 years. She's thought he was dead for 15 years. He's been in a whole nother country for 15 years. And her mother definitely died. Right. You've got all the details right. The mother the father's been in prison. That's one more thing to remember. And he's still in a dangerous situation in France. And they've got to go. He is the treasure that Miss Manette has discovered and is going to uncover. She's going to go reclaim her father and bring him back. So, and then what happens? What do you do if you find a father that you don't know that's from another country? What would your response to that be? And she's your age. I don't know exactly, but 17, teenager. What would your response be if all of a sudden this parent that you thought was dead was alive in a prison in another country, and now you're going to go see him? Think of it as a flight and a drive, because they've got to take a ferry across the straits, the British Channel, English Channel, and then they have to drive by horse and buggy for a while into Paris. What would you think? What would you do? How would you react? Hey, he struck flame. So guys, we broke out 12,000. Yay! We finally did it. I'm excited that we're working on Tale of Two Cities. This is another older version. I had a pretty one that I really liked. It was thick, and I can't find it. I think I ended up leaving it in my classroom. Hopefully these are all the same versions. I don't think they were different translations. I mean, they were written in English. So hopefully nobody has an abridged version and you're following along with me. So let me know. I have a somewhat new poll up that asks you, if you're struggling with depression, or in a anxious state, what do you tend to do? And in an attempt to support well-being and mental health, this pandemic has put many teenagers into a state of anxiety, uncertainty, and depression. I struggle with depression. I've fought depression most of my life. We've got a family history of it in my family. There are times that I don't come on to read, and it's not necessarily because I'm depressed. It may just be I don't have the time. I'm busy with my family. But sometimes doing this takes a lot of energy, and I don't want to come on and be, And that's what I think happens to a lot of us when we're in a depression. We just withdraw. So, hi. Good to see you again. So if you are one that struggles with depression and you don't have anybody to talk to, there are services now that are available because of the pandemic that are being made available. Your schools have money available to them to help with any kind of well-being, anxiety, panic, panic attacks. I've lost the words. So if you're struggling with any kind of those thoughts of, self-harm, crying all the time, overeating or not eating, changing your behaviors, don't be afraid of it. Get the help that you need for it. It's very important that you reach out. I've seen a therapist for years. I still see a therapist probably every other week is my schedule. I'm not ashamed to say that, because mental health is just like I also take pills for, I take metformin for diabetes. So, if I take care of my physical body with medicine and with seeing a doctor, taking care of my mental health is just as important. So if any of you are struggling with depression, reach out for help. You're welcome to contact me and I'll direct you somewhere. I'm certainly not a mental health professional, but I would listen. Life is hard sometimes, but you're tough. You're resilient. You've got grit. You've got strength. Look back at the things you've made it through before and tell yourself that you can make it through again. So I just hope somebody hears this that needs to hear it. Fareed, on a light note, I'm so lazy. And my team, my family who was developing the merch, they've dropped the ball. So who knows if we'll ever have merch, but I think it's such a cute idea. Um, the CBC did. Oh, Kelly, I didn't know that. That was good timing on my part. I just know in my work at the Department of Education, we really are pushing that out constantly, phone numbers. And there's something called SAMHSA in the USA, SAMSHA, and it's probably .org. They've got a mental health hotline on there. There's a suicide hotline. Those things are available. Don't suffer in silence. I think, Fareed, I would like to live in the day when that's just part of education, that every child has a therapist that they see at least once a semester, and then that you could determine if you wanted to see them more often than that. I just think mental health is something we don't really understand, and we're getting better at it. And I think the pandemic has made the system more aware of it. But I'm glad you're willing to say that out loud. It just the little bit I know about your life, Fareed, just the change in culture and the educational challenges, second language, and all of that, you would benefit from talking to somebody, because those are huge life changes. And I see my children's parents were both in the United States. I think we all need a therapist all the time, but this pandemic, I think definitely, yeah. And there is, in the US, there has been money made available to the schools to take care of mental health. So if you're an American teenager, high school student, or middle school student, or college student, contact your school counselors and see if there's anything available because of the pandemic. Or even just some talk groups that you could get into, or even just, we talked in Discord, even some physical movement, yoga or walking, or a sport that you can get engaged in, because sometimes it's a chemical imbalance. So don't be afraid to reach out and talk about it. It's not taboo. It's not a hidden secret. So many people fight depression and anxiety, have anxiety disorders. So you can get help for it. You know, if you broke your arm, would you refuse? And some of you would refuse to go to the doctor, but would you refuse to go to the doctor and not get it set and not get it repaired? That's how we should feel about our mental health as well. Every 5 COVID phase, there was one that had, I know that the depression that I've been fighting with the last few months came on with my bout of COVID. I'm sure of it. Yeah, it's all connected. COVID had some sort of component that was a neurological attack. So I think I can't speak. I think we're getting still a little rain out there. I don't think you can see it though. No, but I hear it. All right, guys, it's the weekend. I will probably read tomorrow. Sundays, a lot of times I do things with my family, so I don't know, but I will definitely try and get on because I want to get through this book. I appreciate you guys. This was a long read. Sorry about that. I hope you have a wonderful night, Friday night. Do something fun. Maybe you have a sports event. Maybe those have started back up again. I don't know. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends if you haven't already. Tell your teacher if you haven't already. Tell your grandparents if you haven't already. I want to read to the world. That's my goal. And I will read to you next time. See ya. You're welcome, Nat.